Approaching a birth chart and making your attempt at horoscope analysis can be so intimidating for the beginner student and even for more advanced astrology students. It can feel a little bit confusing, scattered. You may be looking at a birth chart and say, "Well, what do I do first? Where do I go first? And how do I put this information together?" So I wanted to do a video addressing this topic on a very basic level. So I am going to do my best to keep this beginner level in terms of our chart example and what we're talking about today with horoscope interpretation. So before I do that, I do want to take a moment to introduce myself for those of you who may not know me. Welcome. My name is Maria Di Simone. I'm a professional astrologer, and you can find out more about me and my work at insightfulastrology.com, where I have an entire astrology school offering classes from beginner's level all the way through advanced and professional, if that is something that interests you. Now, this video is inspired because I'm about to open enrollment for a new group of beginners students. So this July, I'm going to be teaching a brand new beginners course. I tend to teach my beginners course twice a year. So if you are interested in enrolling in this course, go and visit my website, go to insightfulastrology.com, get yourself on the waiting list. If the registration is not open just yet, and if it is, grab your spot. There is a $50 discount for early bird registration that will be available. And if there is a class that you see that's currently not open, please get on my class waiting list and you will be personally notified when that next class opens up. And so for this particular video, everything that I cover in this video is going to be something that you would fully understand if you take the beginners class and then the next class, which is the aspects class. So for a beginner astrology student to understand how to connect these dots and weave the web into horoscope analysis, I like to call it weaving the web. It takes a little bit of thinking. It takes a little bit of practice and study. And so I'm going to read you a few of my personal guidelines of how I would recommend that a brand new student attack any birth chart. The top 4 or 5 things to look at. And then we're going to put that into practice using the birth chart of very famous celebrity singer Celine Dion. So we're going to use her birth chart to put everything into practice, and you can have fun practicing along with me. Now, I'm so tempted to go into a full delineation of every detail of the horoscope. I'm going to stop myself once I reach these 4 or 5 points that I'm going to tell you about. Maybe I'll do a part 2 where I analyze her birth chart in greater depth, but this will open the door for you. Following these techniques, do them in order. Every time you approach a birth chart, it gives you some structure. It gives you a good way of handling anybody's birth chart. So what are these steps? The first step that I would love for you guys to get used to looking at for anybody's birth chart is the sun sign. Okay, so anybody's sun sign delineated by sign, by house, and when you're more advanced, you can connect it to the aspects that the sun might make to the rest of the chart. So the sun sign is super important because it is a symbol of where you are going in this lifetime, qualities that you're learning to develop in this lifetime. So you want to have a really nice understanding of anybody's sun sign. The second thing you're going to do is the same information, but for the moon sign. Because whereas the sun is where you're going, the moon represents where you've been, what you need, what you crave. Emotional sustenance. I always tell everybody that the moon is the safety valve of a horoscope. And if your lunar needs are not being met, they're not even understood, then the rest of your chart can't be actualized because you're going to be stuck on this issue of not having your needs met and being rattled all the time because of that. So the moon is super critical. And so the moon, again, is going to tell us where you're coming from, where you've been, where you feel safest, how. So sign of the moon, the house placement of the moon, and for more advanced students, the aspects that the moon makes to the rest of the chart. Number 3 on your list is going to be the rising sign and then the ruler of your rising sign, the planetary ruler of your rising sign, because that is known as the ruler of your entire chart. So the sign on the cusp of the that first house position there, the ascendant there, the sign there, the rising sign is, I call this the cover of your book. It is how you come across to others. Some astrologers refer to it as your astrological handshake. Okay. It's like, hey, how are you? This is me. This is what you see. And it is a very important part of your horoscope because that sign, whatever sign is there symbolically, it actually shows you the way, the style that you're going to go about in order to actualize your sun sign. So you're going to use those ascendant qualities to grow into your sun sign, to become your sun sign. Very important to include that in your analysis. And then you're going to look at, well, what planet rules that ascendant of mine or whoever's birth chart you're looking at. The planetary ruler of your rising sign, like I said, it is the ruler of your chart. And that planet, by sign, house, placement, it symbolizes something important about your soul's most immediate purpose in this lifetime and what you're really driven towards in this lifetime. So don't ignore the ruler of your chart. Critical place in a horoscope. So we've got sun, moon, rising sign, ruler of your rising sign, right? And next, what the number 5 thing that I want you to look at for anybody's birth chart, right after you've done that, look at the chart and say, hey, are there any angular planets? Angular planets are loud and proud. Any planet that is within 5 degrees of any of the angles, whether it's the first house, the fourth house, the seventh, or the 10th house, within 5 degrees of that angle, applying is going to be the strongest. But even if it's already in the house, and let's say within 3 to the most 5 degrees in that house, angular planet, very, very loud. It will dominate the chart. It will dominate the personality. And again, my key phrase for angular planets are that they are loud and proud. You will not miss angular planets in a person's life and how they come out in their energy, in their psyche, because the angles of a chart are points of energy manifestation. It is where that cross of life meets the physical reality, physical earth here. So it's super important to look at those angular planets. Next, I want you to take a look at your aspect grid and identify the tightest aspects that a person has. And I mean a degree or less. If they don't have aspects a degree or less, just look for whatever are the tightest aspects. And you could pick 1, 2, 3, whatever you're comfortable with. Tightest in orb first, because those are going to be palpable in a person's life and psyche and chart. They're going to feel them. They're going to dominate. So you want to delineate those tightest aspects first before you integrate any other aspects that are being made. Now, I use the Ptolemaic aspects only in my chart analysis. So I'm using the conjunction, the sextile, the trine, the square, and the opposition. And that's what I recommend you do, especially if you're a beginner, because you want to eliminate all the noise and the chaos, and you want to learn how to focus on what is really important and how to get to the heart of anybody's chart. And this will help you do that. Being a judicious astrologer and fine-tuning your analysis in this way will help you. And then once you've got that down, you are free to expand your horizons and go check out every fixed star or asteroid or whatever minor aspects interest you. But for beginners especially, please stick to the basics and master that first. Okay, so we're going to look for those tightest aspects. Now, something that I should have mentioned first before you even do any of those other steps, and then this is going to be the last thing I tell you for this beginner video, is there's something called balancing a chart. And you can balance a chart in terms of the elements and modes. And in my beginner's class, I teach you how to do this. And this is actually one of the most common areas for astrology students to get stuck in not being able to then delineate a horoscope, because not having a full understanding of the elements and the modes and how they function in a person's birth chart is super critical. So actually, step number one before you do anything else should be to balance the elements and modes in a birth chart and just get a bird's eye view. Well, is this person really low on one element or mode? Maybe they have no placements or only one placement. And that's going to tell you something. If a person is super low or has no fire, for example, or super low on cardinal energy. Conversely, if the person is overly abundant in an element or mode, that will also tell you something loud and clear. Does a person have a dominant fixed energy in their chart? Does a person have a ton of water? And that's the dominant feature when you're balancing the elements and the modes. Not everybody will have a chart signature. Not everybody will have an overabundance or a lack. So it's not going to be loud for everybody, but it is important to look at, because if it's there, you want to talk about it. You want to add it to your analysis. And so you balance those elements and modes, and then you go from there to the other steps. So what we're going to do now is look at Celine's birth chart. We're going to apply all of this together, and I am going to try my very best not to veer away from these points, because I think this is enough for a beginner student to really attack a birth chart. And like I said, I'll try to do a part 2 at a later date where we can talk about getting more detail from the birth chart with other aspects. Okay, so let me put up Celine's birth chart now. And her data through Astro Data Bank is it's A rating. I think it might even be a double A rating. So it's very reliable. If you're new to my channel, you might not know the type of astrologer that I am. I do work with the Placidus house system. I consider myself a modern astrologer. However, I have studied traditional astrology, and I am very fond of integrating some traditional techniques into my analysis. But primarily, I do consider myself a modern astrologer. So this is Celine's birth chart. And what we're going to do first is balance those elements and modes. And, for my beginner students, I give you a whole handout on how to do this, and you practice it. It's actually a homework assignment. So just to remind you, if you want more information about my classes, they are personalized. I use my students' birth chart in the lesson plans and the homework assignments. So it's a very unique learning experience. And you get my unlimited email support and attention. I am the only teacher you will have. I am the only person checking your work, answering your questions, teaching you the material. So you really do get a true mentorship with me as your instructor when you are a student of mine. So I hope you go check out my classes over at insightfulastrology.com. Now, let's start with the balancing of the elements and the modes. So I'm not going to get into the specific technique that I use, what I count, what I don't count here. I'm going to do it very quickly because, for the sake of time. But when you balance the elements and the modes in Celine's birth chart, and you take into consideration her planetary placements, I like to use the south node of the moon in my count and the ascendant in my count. You can see that when it comes to the modes, cardinal, fixed, mutable, she's actually completely balanced. She's got 4 of each. She's totally balanced here. So there's no issue when it comes to a lack of a mode or an overabundance of a mode. But when you check out her elements, you see a bit of a different story. Celine has a clear signature of being very heavy fire and very low in air. And that heavy fire personality, you can see it in Celine Dion, right? You can really see that just excitement, that charge, that energy, this powerful presence that she has. It's just this sunny disposition, all of it. You can see it very much, how she just gets you going energetically, and she just has that flair. So she's got a dominant fire energy. She's pretty balanced with earth and water, but she's very low on air. In fact, if you look at this birth chart, you'll see she has no planetary placements at all in air. She only has the south node of the moon in an air sign. And that can suggest something, generally speaking, about her personality. So maybe there is a bit of an intellectual inferiority in some way that she had to overcome. Sometimes people with a lack of air feel that in their life. Usually, when there's a lack of an element in your chart, you go and you attract people into your life who have a dominant energy to make up for that lack. So she may have a lot of air people in her life, a lot of Gemini, a lot of Aquarius, a lot of Libra energy. She may have that dominant in her life and be very attracted to that to help her balance what she's lacking. Now, this doesn't mean there is a lack of intelligence. So don't misunderstand me. Not at all. Okay. Not at all. It can just symbolize that academic studies and intellectual pursuits and the air element in general might have some kind of issue attached to it for her in her journey. You're going to understand that later on when we start to delineate more of her chart. And so obviously she's an incredible singer. So she has a voice and she has a brain. Okay. So take it for what it is, take it with a grain of salt. That's just one aspect of chart delineation. So we're just opening the door now to Celine's chart, and we already have this feel, heavy, fiery energy, a little bit of a lack there in air. And now what's next? Now we're going to go and look at the sun. So the sun in Celine's chart is in Aries, and it is in the ninth house of the horoscope, but it is angular. It is conjunct her midheaven within that 5-degree mark. So her sun is going to be loud and proud. Sun in Aries, right away. This is somebody who needs to learn how to exert their force in their energy in life. Someone who is here to learn about courage, independence, leadership, to learn about one's identity and creating a solid sense of self in this world. Her sun is on the ninth house side, but it is leaning towards the 10th. So you're going to delineate for both areas. Now, the ninth house is that big, expansive energy of the truth seeker, someone who is inspirational, someone who might have a big connection to international matters, broadcasting, publishing, the legal world. Okay, these are some general energies connected to ninth house matters. Academic pursuits, but this is not academic pursuits in her life. And you understand that because you can understand that she has broadcasted so much of her identity and inspired others through her voice, not academic pursuits. So the sun is, she's learning about all of this, right? In this lifetime, but it is also leaning towards the 10th house cusp, and it is angular. So that sun is loud and proud, and we're also going to read it for the 10th house. And that suggests she is meant to shine her light and pioneer her own way in career and to have success and glory and fame and honors very, very dominantly in very forceful, courageous ways, right? Beautiful, beautiful energy. So all of you beginner students should be able to pull together enough keywords connected to the sun sign, the sun in Aries, the sun in the ninth house, and the sun in the 10th house. Get a good feel of what she is learning how to develop in this lifetime, where she's supposed to be going, right? Now we're going to go to her moon sign. And in this case, the sun and the moon are in the same sign. And I get this question all the time from my beginner students. Well, what if the sun and the moon are in the same sign? How do you delineate that? Well, literally what that means is where you're going is where you've been, where you've come from. It's just that you have to work on something in that area again. That's all. So for Celine, she has a deep need to do Aries-like things, like deep ambition, deep need to be number one. There is a competitive edge to this woman and this energy, and you're starting to see it very clearly, right? There is this need to succeed and to show that courage and to be that leader. So she is learning to develop Aries qualities, but she's also quite comfortable with those Aries qualities because she's been there before. And what she has to do to make herself feel safe whenever she's feeling rattled is to do something for herself, put her own oxygen mask on, self-preservation, or to go out there and do something pioneering that no one else has done before, to be that leader, to show her courage, to be that Wonder Woman energy, to be ambitious and succeed, be number one at something. So I would think that Celine's doing a great job of fulfilling her needs, her solar and lunar energies in this lifetime. That moon's in the 10th house, so the need is also connected to career success, to having a place in the world, leaving that legacy behind. Okay, so now we go to the ascendant next. Leo rising. Leo rising people, sunny side up, for sure. Very open, warm, generous personality. The type of personality that comes across and you see this person and you feel fully embraced by their warmth. They make you feel like you are the most important person in the world. So her astrological handshake has everything to do with, okay, world, here I am, but guess what? You are so special, and I'm going to remind you of that too. And you certainly feel that with her energy. This makes the ruler of her chart, the ruler of her rising sign, it's the sun. So we're coming back to the sun here. So the sun is not just in her chart connected to where she needs to go in this lifetime and quality she's learning to develop, but it is very much connected to her soul's most urgent purpose in this lifetime. So Celine has these very dominant Aries sun solar needs, 9th, 10th house for her life. Okay. So we're not going to look at aspects that the sun or the moon makes. We're going to move on. We're going to now consider the tightest. They're angular planets. I'm sorry. Before we do that, we have to finish our analysis of angular planets. We talked about the sun as an angular planet, but Saturn is also an angular planet. And Saturn is going to be loud and proud in her life, in her psyche. Saturn in Aries. Now, let me just tell you, yes, Saturn is in its sign of detriment, but it's angular. And you do want to consider planetary dignity. That's something that maybe we'll do more later. But for now, just know that it's angular. Saturn is in her 10th house. Saturn is the ruler traditionally of her partnership sector and also her 6th house. And this Saturn placement is absolutely something that I think you could see in her energy, because with all of that fiery spirit that she has, you can also see this just duty, dedication, responsibility, this workhorse energy where she will do what she has to do and will deny herself whatever she needs to in order to achieve what she desires professionally. She very much shows that ambitious energy to be seen as the authority in her career path, to be seen, to be respected. Saturn 10th house people desire to be respected. And so her Saturn is angular, and rulership dynamics is something really for the part 2 video. I said I wouldn't veer off. I just couldn't help myself because her husband, as you know, was her manager, and he was significantly older than her, but he was also the love of her life. And I think that's just so beautifully dominantly reflected with this Saturn placement. And her current health struggles is also very much reflected by that. But I'm going to stop myself because I do not want to make this video more advanced than I intend it to be. So now that we have talked about the angular planets, we're going to go for the tightest aspects in a birth chart next. For this, You can either hand draw aspects, and I teach you how to do this in my aspects class because I'm a big fan of hand drawing your own aspects and learning how to do that to really connect with the chart. But for today's demonstration, we are just going to look at the aspect grid. So here is the aspect grid. You learn how to read an aspect grid in classes with me, but if you already know this, you want to look for the aspects that are a degree or less first, if the person has any. We clearly see a few of them here. We see Mercury is conjunct Venus. We see this is a generational aspect because it's between a social planet and an outer planet, but I am going to mention it. We see Jupiter square Neptune. And we see the other tightest aspect here actually is between Mars and her ascendant. So these are the aspects that are, I'm not going to include this sextile here. It is a tight aspect, but that is a generational aspect and it doesn't matter. So the Uranus, sextile Neptune, that you don't care about those types of aspects in natal delineation unless it's angular or attaches to a personal planet. And I teach you this in my classes. So, people need to learn how to properly organize and judge measurements. And this is one of the rules. But we are going to look at her Mercury conjunct Venus, the Mars square ascendant, and the Jupiter square Neptune. There is also, how did I miss this one? The Saturn conjunct midheaven, which we actually already talked about, but I'll mention it again. That's actually the tightest. Look at the orb there, guys. It's 7 minutes. Saturn conjunct the midheaven. It is the absolute tightest aspect in her chart. Jupiter square Neptune is next. Saturn square ascendant is next. And then Mercury conjunct Venus. So the rest of the aspects you would look at when you're more advanced and more comfortable. And by the way, if your aspect grid doesn't look like mine, that's probably because you do not have it programmed or set to the Ptolemaic aspects only. And the orbs that are used here, it's a specific orb set. Every software program has gives you the ability to program your own orbs for aspects, or it does just a regular set that it has. So I'm now going to hand draw these aspects so that you feel it. Mercury conjunct Venus, Saturn conjunct the midheaven, Mars square the ascendant. Feel that square. And the other aspect is Jupiter square Neptune. Okay. So let's start with the Saturn conjunct midheaven. That was the tightest aspect. We did talk about this already, but it shows the fierce determination that this woman has to work towards career success. Her career is everything to her. She takes her career so seriously. It is very much her identity, right? And it is connected to her karmic path. We're not going to delineate Saturn in terms of karma, in terms of your greatest fear and what you're here to master and overcome. But I guess we could go ahead and look at that. Saturn in Aries is definitely a placement where you're here to overcome the literal fear of expressing your authentic self, your identity. And I think it's so interesting that Celine has this theme of Aries sun, Aries moon, and then Saturn in Aries. So she's so used to doing Aries energy, but she was clearly meant to come into this lifetime to do it all over again in a new way, to very specifically be that pioneer in her career path. Saturn in the 10th house people have this karmic obligation to their soul to overcome a fear of success/failure in this lifetime, generally speaking. So she also with the North Node in Aries, that this amplifies, this is connected so much to her soul's purpose in this lifetime. It says it over and over in her chart. North Node in Aries, Saturn in Aries, the sun being in Aries and being the ruler of her chart. So all of that is keys to her soul's most immediate purpose in this lifetime. She was meant to redo some Aries stuff big time. Now, that is one aspect in her chart. The next tightest aspect, I'm just going to mention this Jupiter square Neptune. And the only reason why I'm mentioning it quite honestly. It doesn't really attach to an angle in her chart. It's not super important. It's not next to a personal planet. So it's not super important, but it is worth mentioning that people who got Jupiter square Neptune have this over idealism, this heavy optimistic energy and feel. And so that does show up, I think, in her personality. It's the only reason why I'm mentioning it. But this aspect is so incredibly revealing for her. Look at that Mercury conjunct Venus. And look at the dichotomy here, because Venus is super strong. She's in her sign of exaltation, whereas Mercury is super weak. He is in his sign of detriment and fall. And so we're starting to see a theme here of Mercury stuff, right? If you remember, she's very low on air. She's got Mercury in detriment and fall, but it's next to Venus in exaltation. And this is a really tight conjunction. So Venus has the ability to lift up this Mercury. And this conjunction is literally responsible for her incredible voice. The singing ability, Venus next to Mercury. However, what is so notable about Celine Dion is that she has never written any of her own songs. She is not a songwriter like so many other incredible vocalists out there who they like to write their own music, write their own songs, then sing them. This is amazing, amazing fact about Celine Dion. She is not known for being a writer, a songwriter. And I think that is because she may have some kind of either insecurity about that, or maybe there is just something about her not seeing her own talent or ability in that area. Because again, Mercury is in its detriment and fall, and she's so low on air. That's just me speculating with my own little analysis. Celine was here to talk to us. I would love to hear her thoughts, but obviously she's not going to be weighing in on this video. but the other thing for part 2 of the video, that Venus and Mercury it is very complicated because it is also opposing Pluto and Uranus. So there is something about giving away her power and her voice to other people and letting them control that. And I think that really did start with her manager and husband. It worked out very well for her, but again, it's an interesting thing to talk about. So that Venus, I'm sorry, the Mercury conjunct Venus aspect, being a tight aspect, is also there in the 9th house. And this adds to how her talent, her voice has inspired, has lifted up. I mean, listening to this woman sing is a spiritual experience, I think. And the successful broadcasting of her voice internationally, come on, that conjunction is so loud. Now, let's go to the Mars square ascendant. This is interesting because if you notice Celine Dion's energy, it's a little clumsy, okay? Not in a bad way, but if you look at how she walks and how she carries herself, maybe clumsy is the wrong word. Hopefully you know what I'm getting at here. But that Mars in Taurus, Mars is also in its sign of detriment. Mars in Taurus is slow and deliberate. And Mars square her Leo rising here, I think that's what creates this clumsy type of look where she tries to be quick or tries to do something and then it's not executed the way that it could be. Okay. That's and also her loudness, her brashness, her aggressiveness, it can come out in different ways in her personality, and you can kind of see it. Not that she's a violent person or an aggressive person, but she's very commanding with her voice and with her energy. And she has this forcefulness in her character that you see, but it's a little like what does this belong here kind of a thing when you see it displayed in her personality. So that is interesting to notice. Okay, so I am so tempted to keep going and to talk about things like money in her chart and how you can find it, and the additional aspects, and to weave in rulership dynamics. But I think I am going to save that for a part 2 video, which is going to be a little bit more advanced analytic interpretive techniques. This has given you enough to work with if you are a beginner student. You might even feel overwhelmed. And if you're an intermediate student, hopefully it's given you a way to approach a horoscope with more confidence and deliberation. So let me know in the comments if this was helpful. Let me know if you follow these techniques already, or if this is new information for you and something that you're going to now explore in your own chart interpretation. So thanks for watching, guys. And I do hope that some of you decide to become a student of mine at some point. Again, check out the beginners class. There's also a progressions class open right now. Depending on the time that you watch this video, because this is an evergreen video, it's just I'm posting it at a time when I have those classes open. There's so many classes that I offer. And again, it's a personalized learning experience. So I hope you decide to become one of my students at some point. Bye.